Good afternoon. Our committee today received testimony from John Durham concerning his report on misconduct at the FBI and the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. We did so as a committee on a bipartisan basis. There was a great camaraderie among our members trying to find answers to if there is misconduct, what are the solutions, what are the reforms. It was interesting to hear from Mr. Durham that he has concerns that there are reforms that need to go into place and that there are still issues that need to be addressed. He was very forthcoming and sharing with us, and I think that we were able to get some information that would be very helpful for us in the work that we have to do on both FISA renewal, FISA reforms, and also reform issues with the FBI. And I appreciate my ranking member, Jim Himes. We've approached this together on the issue of, what are the next steps, what do we need to do? And I think Mr. Durham's been a great partner today for that. Ms. Himes.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And I concur with everything that the Chairman said. We had a good, very detailed, fairly lengthy examination of all of the aspects of Special Counsel Durham's report. There was good comity in the room, good discussion. We helped each other out. The committee really was focused on, particularly on something so sensitive as an investigation that pertains to political candidates. How can we make sure that the behavior of the investigative authorities, in this case the FBI, is beyond reproach? We have had, both in the Clinton investigation, the emails, and of course the Crossfire Hurricane investigations, and very recent past, very, very sensitive investigations. Who knows where we'll go in the future, but we know that we have to learn from the mistakes made in these investigations to make sure that Americans can have confidence in both the prosecutorial power of the federal government and in their elections.
Could you go into specifics about what you all talked about in there? What did Durham talk to you all about? What questions did you ask him?
Well, our sessions are closed, and so we're not permitted to be able to tell specific questions and specific answers that occurred. We can certainly tell you our impressions, and I will tell you that both the members of the committee and Mr. Durham really embraced the substantive details within his report. I mean, he's been very thorough in his investigation and in the information that is there. We discussed, obviously, our concerns and his concerns about misconduct, but the real focus of our committee is what's next. We don't want this to happen again, both to the American public, to a president, to a candidate, and how do we put steps in place we can at least try to head this off in the past.
The questions pertained a lot, as you might imagine, to some of the differences between the Special Counsel's report and the IG Horowitz's report, because there are some distinctions there. We were very interested in what the reason for those distinctions were. We really probed the boundaries of what Special Counsel Durham was able to do. There were certain people who didn't want to be interviewed, and so we really tried to get at the boundaries. But honestly, if you read either the IG report, and I hope you do, and Special Counsel Durham's report, and I hope you do, you'll discover that the conflict is not so much in the black letter text of those reports, it's in the expectations that were built around those reports. So if you believed that the behavior of the FBI was perfect in Crossfire Hurricane, you were sorely disappointed. If you believed the Special Counsel Durham was going to uncover a massive deep state conspiracy, you were disappointed. The report itself is actually quite useful for our purposes of oversight.
As far as recommendations go, the report itself didn't lay out any significant recommendations other than maybe like a new role to handle politically sensitive investigations. Can you speak a little bit about what the Special Counsel said today?
Sure. So the report itself, Mr. Durham specifically states that even though he could have, he did not lay out recommendations. In our inquiries with him to ask him to come testify before our committee, he agreed that he would discuss with us his lessons learned, his issues that he thinks need to be addressed, in addition to take questions from us as to what proposals we think might be able to address it and to give his background on those. Yes.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Turner. Why was the hearing closed? Like, what elements were classified? And second, do you think the Durham report and all these investigations, do you think there needs to be classification reform in the U.S. intelligence community and the U.S.
So classification reform is a separate question, and we are dealing with that in the committee. That is something that just as you can look at all the issues that we've had of mishandling of classified documents, that our committee is taking up, but it does need to be done.
Chairman,
Why was it closed?
as far as the FISA issue is concerned, after
listening to Mr. Durham, where is the committee right now as far as re-upping FISA at this point? And what we hear very often about accountability for the FBI, and the FBI says, yeah, sure, we've already fixed everything, and then all of a sudden we're kind of back to a Groundhog Day. Where are you right now on that?
Right. I don't think anybody on our committee is completely satisfied with the reforms that the FBI has undertaken. They're certainly a great start. They are responding to some of the issues and problems that are identified in the Durham report and in some of the issues and angst that members of Congress themselves have. But I think our goal in reforms to FISA will probably go beyond that and maybe even codify some of the ones that have been proposed.
Yeah, I think I said this earlier. I think the committee, and I think this is pretty close to unanimous on the committee, is because we appreciate the absolutely essential quality of FISA 702 to keeping us safe from fentanyl, from terrorism, from Iranian plots. I could go on. It must be reauthorized. I also think it is unanimous that it must be reauthorized with reforms. And at the core of those reforms really is, in my opinion, U.S. person queries. And if you think about that, as the chairman said, there have been a lot of reforms already made. So the minimalist position would be, let's just do that. Of course, the maximalist position is probably, don't let the FBI do U.S. person queries or make them subject to a judicial warrant. Where we fall at the end of the day between those two extremes, if you will, I think that's still to be determined.
Last couple questions. Yes.
Chairman Turner, do you worry with tomorrow's public hearing in a more kind of politicized committee that what you accomplished today could be jeopardized?
Well, I am glad that we went first, because I think that having Mr. Durham in this environment allowed him to be very forthcoming and very sharing of his thoughts and ideas. Certainly tomorrow has a different purpose, but I do think that he was very comfortable at this point with the commitment that our members had on a bipartisan and professional basis to deal with his work to share with us.
Yeah, the world is different when the cameras are running. Behind closed doors, when the cameras weren't running, I will tell you that on both sides there was an attempt to get at the truth, rather than what I fear you might see tomorrow, which is an attempt to maybe elide or angle the truth a little bit in the service of one's political agenda. That didn't happen in our meeting, and I think that was useful for this committee.
On that,
We had last question. I think.
where are you at on the shift censure resolution, the new one this week?
We're not going to comment on that. This is about the Durham investigation.
Was it your
All right,
opinion that
Les,
special counsel believes
you already have.
Just taking
Sorry.
the FISA piece aside, I'm kind of curious what this left you thinking in terms of like other reforms at the FBI.
It was very clear that Mr. Durham believes that there was misconduct, and as you've all, in reading his report, he lays out what those instances of misconduct are. He gave us the impression that some of the misconduct is individualized, like there were bad people doing bad things. But then some of it is systemic, and some of it is where we need changes so that there's higher reviews, there's higher requirements for this to ever happen again. And he did share those with us, and I do think that that gives us an opportunity.
Just a quick follow-up on that question. What is your sense of, there's a lot of talk of politicization of the FBI and with regard to some of what I'm sure was discussed behind closed doors. Did you get a sense of whether you still think there's politicization there? Or
Can I take a shot at that? So let's be very clear to the specifics of your question. The IG Horowitz, did not find politicization, and the special counsel Durham did not find it either. He found confirmation bias, which is bad, but that's just, we're moving in a direction and we're going to keep moving, maybe without being reflective enough. That's different than saying it was politicized. But the larger point, before the chairman gives his opinion on that, the larger point I would make is that I grew up in a generation where you sort of revered the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, for whatever you may imagine of J. Edgar Hoover. It's been very interesting in this job because I have found, and I think we have found collectively, that culturally and procedurally, the FBI has a lot of work to do. And I would contrast them to CIA and to NSA and the other agencies that we deal with. It's very sensitive right now because we have to reauthorize 702. But whether you're looking at some of the findings of the Durham report or the recently declassified FISA opinions, which found deficiencies in the FBI's handling of U.S. persons query, or going back to, you know, the director of the FBI in October before a national election announcing publicly an investigation of one of the two candidates. There are all kinds of things where we need to, I think, redouble our efforts in, if it's not quite depoliticizing, at least making sure that the FBI acts in such a manner that Americans can't point to their activities and say that's clearly political. And we have a long way to go on that.
This is the last answer to the last questions. The issue here is not just politicization. The issue here is these were presidential political campaigns. And so that's what it has such a higher degree of standard of concern, because it can affect political and electoral outcomes. And that's why our conversations were so important today. Thank you all very much.